last 10 years, nutritional deficiency related admissions to hospital have gone up 3x. 850,000 people last year were admitted to hospital just on nutritional deficiency.
That's Fizel, co-founder and former COO of Algbra, and now the CEO and co-founder of Performr.ai, moving from a Series B Fintech to starting again in health tech.
We combined digital acquisition with community events and then content creation off the back of the community events, right? When Standard Chartered took a stake in the business, our rating was like 4.7 stars or something. We had a launch, which, broadly speaking, 0 hiccups.
But health challenges for himself and his family changed his perspective.
How many other people must be going through something similar, right? So Performr is going to be the world's first wearable device, the same size as a watch, that can actually tell you your vitamin levels, mineral levels, hormone levels, without actually going into your blood.
You can learn more about his fascinating story and all the sacrifices along the way. Algbra continues to thrive, and Performr is taking on a big new challenge.
I want everyone to turn around and say, of course that was possible.
So you've been doing great stuff, and you're on the second startup now.
Yep.
But let's rewind. When you were a kid, what did you want to be growing up?
It's a great question. I think it changed about 1,000 times. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to be. But when I was about 17, I actually had to start deciding it when I wanted to go to university. I thought, do you know what? What I want to do is I want to make an impact, right? And I didn't know what that exactly meant at the time, right? But I knew that I wanted to make an impact. And I thought the two places where you could do that is either in business or in politics. So then I went to university and I studied law because I figured in law, you could either go into business or you could go into politics. And whilst I was there, I went to the Oxford Union, and then I walked in and I looked around and I stayed there for an hour and I thought, this is not for me. So I thought that was the moment where I decided actually I wanted to go into something where I could build products, where I could see them in people's hands and I could see them being happy with them and getting those moments that make them feel better.
So what happened there? Did you drop out or?
At Oxford? No, I stayed. I actually did law. I mean, the story is that, it took me a law degree, a master's, 6 years of practicing law to realize that I hated it. But in truth, I wanted to go somewhere where I could build, where I could know what it was like to be in $1 billion business. That was what I wanted to do. I actually started off my career in startups. I worked for a company called Obelisk Legal Support, and they were doing working from home before working from home was ever fashionable. So most women tend to leave the legal career in the middle of their careers and work from home because they've got kids to raise, right? Except at the time, there was no such thing as working from home. So this business would outsource work to them. And that allowed exceptionally qualified lawyers to continue to be involved in work. And it allowed companies to get exceptional legal advice much more cheaply than they would have in the city. So that was actually where I started off my career.
Nice. And so you said like you knew straight away that it wasn't necessarily the right place.
Yeah.
Then how did that affect the decisions you then went into? So you said you continued to stay in law, even though you weren't quite sure it was the right place for you.
I think I was very, very happy to go into law because there was still a huge commercial element involved, right? I was in commercial law. That's what I did. So for about 6 years, I worked on some of the largest M&A transactions, a lot of them in technology as well. I worked for the SoftBank Vision Fund. I worked on the SoftBank Vision Fund deal. I did tech investments into the United States. So I really enjoyed that part of it. And I liked it because success was dependent on very objective metrics, right? There wasn't a huge amount of subjectivity around it, right? So that's why I didn't really want to go into politics. I wanted to go into business. And law was an amazing, amazing stepping stone to doing that. Everything from doing your late nights to managing complex situations and actually delivering something to a very, very high standard and a very high quality. Those are the skills that I picked up in law.
So Austrian, we were chatting earlier about how you've got a martial arts background, right?
Yes.
And you did that like earlier when you were younger, but then you come back to it again recently. How much do you think that martial arts played in your attitude towards work as well and that ability to do a lot of hours? Hugely. I mean, the one thing they'll teach you, the first thing they'll teach you is, stay calm, stay relaxed, right? I was very fortunate to actually go and train at the Shaolin Temple in China, right? So I spent 6 weeks there and I did the whole thing, a bit like now where I shaved off my hair, but even less hair than I have at the moment. And I went and I stayed in a temple for 6 weeks, right? And initially I went there because I wanted to learn how to actually compete in the ring and so on, right? Actually, I came back having learned all of the softer stuff, meditation, Tai Chi, because over there, they see those two things as inherently interlinked, right? You can't be too hard, you can't be too soft, you have to have a nice balance between the two, right? So when you're doing your late night, when things are going wrong, when things aren't exactly working, you realize that actually just center yourself back in
and reset. And that ability to center yourself back in and reset is incredibly valuable. And there's no better place to learn it than either in a startup or when you're in the ring and someone's trying to get one over.
Yeah, I credit like my martial arts background as well so much with my attitude, because like I said, when I was younger, if you're used to having to like fight off black belts and like having to defend yourself and all these different scenarios, especially in training, for example, we have like 3-on-1 and these different things. If you can handle that, then a lot of other stuff just seems a lot less scary, right?
Exactly.
It's doing hard stuff that really does help.
Yeah.
And like I said, you worked in law for like 6 years, right?
Yeah.
When did you start to get the itch? Okay, you've worked on M&A, you've worked on these SoftBank Vision Fund, to now let me try and do something myself, or let me try and build.
It's an excellent question. When I completed my training contract in law, I actually sat my GMAT, right? And I was going to do an MBA. And mentally it was, I'm going to go do a 1-year MBA, and it would be a personal incubator, right? That's where I can meet co-founders. That's where I can meet potential investors. That's where I can test out ideas. And it will just be a year where I can do that without the pressure of actually working 7 days a week, 6 days a week in an incredible law firm, right? So that was initially the plan, right? Now, as I was applying for my MBAs and I got the offers to do my MBAs, acquaintances that I actually knew who were also involved with Clifford Chance, right? They were looking to work with them at the time. They reached out to me on a Saturday and they said, Hazel, do you want to go out this evening, right? So we went out, we met for coffee, and they said, listen, there's an idea called Algebra, right? This is what we're looking to do, and this is what we're looking to build. Half of the world's unbanked are Muslim, and we want to build a digital bank that can serve their needs. I said, okay, let me think about it. This was on a Saturday. By Friday, I handed in my notice at Clifford Chance, right? And I was living in Dubai at the time. I moved out from Dubai, came back to the UK in the middle of COVID, and we started to build out Algebra, right? It was something where once the opportunity was there and it happened, I decided, let me just take this opportunity and I will make the absolute best of it.
Also, it's a big decision made there, right?
Yeah.
And it's played out really well. But at that time, what was the reaction of the people around you? Because like you said, you're going to go to an MBA, and like, obviously, MBAs were very prestigious. It's very status-driven, right? It helps people like, oh, okay, you've done an MBA. And then to gift it up and then go into what you're doing. Were people around you supportive? How did that feel internally? Like, were you very confident and decision straight away, or did it take a bit of time to?
They were incredibly supportive. I was very, very fortunate that the people around me were incredibly supportive about it. And actually, once, we got the pre-seed round going and we started to invite investors, a huge number of my friends invested in the business, right? A huge number of my ex-colleagues invested in the business. My bosses invested in the business. So actually that really made the journey. In many ways, it made it a lot easier because I felt like I had the support of my community around me. In many ways, I thought, you know what, I really have to deliver for everyone now because it's extremely personal. But then when you're building your business, it always is. So
I think it's interesting because I think sometimes people have in their heads that nobody's going to support them, right? That their friends aren't going to care, or like their family are going to think they're whatever. But actually, there's more and more stories that you hear of actually people do support you.
Yeah.
And if you don't share your idea, don't share what you're thinking because you're worried about what people are going to think, you don't give people the chance to actually be supportive, right? If they don't know what you're doing, how can they support you?
Exactly. I think most people would jump at the opportunity to be helpful, right? Most people would jump at the opportunity to kind of push you forward and to motivate you and push you and help you to achieve what you want to achieve, right? Because I think somebody achieving their ambition and positivity can be a very, very infectious thing, right? So I think, just opening that up. And actually, there are going to be people that turn around and say, well, I don't think you should do this, right? That's a silly idea. Guess what? You're going to get that from now all the way through to IPO. You are going to get that from absolutely everybody, right? So it's also good training to just have a bit of thick skin and crack on and get on with it.
So you mentioned there the problem, right? So the problem was that half the world's unbanked and Muslim.
Yeah.
Now you've got to try and solve that problem.
Yeah.
How did you go about that? What were the steps you took? What was the actual product or solution you come up with?
So start with your end goal, with your vision, and work backwards from that, right? If that's my vision there for half of the world's unbanked, well, what's the previous one? Well, not half of them are going to get a quarter of them, right? If you look at a quarter of them, well, which countries are they kind of based in? Okay, well, we need to launch into these different countries. Great. If I want to launch into these different countries, what is it that's going to help me to launch into those countries? Well, if you're actually based in the UK with a credible banking system, and credible regulatory system, and amazing technology, where you have the talent here to actually build that, that's what you need to do, right? From there, it's a hub and spoke situation. You can go into all of those other countries. So then we're okay, we're launching in the UK. To launch in the UK, you have to be successful. Great. Which customers are going to be successful? And actually, in each case, there's a product market fit assessment, there's a customer segmentation assessment, there's a product assessment. But that's completely natural and normal. All of those things are well known, right? The innovation is in how you get from where you are all the way through there. And you're going to face 1,000 challenges on the way, right? But all solvable and all manageable.
So what you said there, it's common sense, but I think many people don't necessarily realize that, right? Because the challenge, especially in something mission-driven like what you're doing there, where you're trying to help all these people are unbanked. But if people focus on that end target, sometimes they miss how you set intermediary steps.
Yeah.
And it can be so easy to get overwhelmed by trying to help 500 million people, how many people there are, and actually breaking it down into different problems. You mentioned there about what you do at the beginning isn't necessarily what you're going to do later on.
Correct.
And I think a lot of people struggle with that concept.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh, but I'm selling out. Oh, I'm not actually working towards it. But I just said, you need to be successful in something to have a base to go onto there.
Yeah.
And for people who are in that kind of moral quandary at the moment where they're like, okay, this is what I want to achieve, but if I'm doing this other thing, is that the right path I should take?
Yeah. And people want to start in developing the final product. Guess what? The final product is never going to be the final product, right? The person that you were last year isn't the same person that you are this year. Your view of the world is going to change. Your perspectives, your motivations, your customers are going to change, right? Everybody that was developing certain software applications 3 years ago, all of their products have changed overnight because ChatGPT came along and AI is now a much more mainstream thing than it was in the past, right? The world is going to continue to change, right? The only thing that you can do is take that first step. You might not know how the old saying goes, right? You don't know how you're going to get to the top of the mountain, but you don't plot the path all the way from the very beginning, right? You take the first step and you take the second step and the path becomes clearer to you as you get on. And just going back to what we were saying earlier, right? I think building a business, entrepreneurship, all of that fun stuff, right? It's as much about managing yourself as it is about managing a huge business or a small business or a problem or a solution or an opportunity. And where you can manage yourself and think, you know what? I will get on with this. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to have the confidence in myself to make it happen. That's the thing that's going to drive you from that tiny 1-person, 2-person organization all the way through to being a massive organization.
As you said, when you joined, right? Tiny 1 or 2-person organization, right at the very start.
Yeah.
You've got to decide what role you're going to play in that and how's that dynamic's going to be. And could you talk a bit about that? Like, how did you figure out which role you're going to take and what role you're best suited to?
So my background was in law, right? I did a lot of financial services as well. I did a lot of regulation. So it just made sense, right? For me and Ziad as well, my co-founder in Algebra, huge amount of respect for him, right? I learned so much from him. It was very important that we actually just stuck to what we knew best, right? And Ziad had built his first business from 0 to 2.5 billion of AUM in about 3 years, right? And then the idea of Algebra came along to him and the opportunity, and that's when he gave me a call and we started up. So for him, kind of fundraising, setting the vision, setting the strategy, setting the motivation for the business. For me, it was just sweep everything, right? But because of my legal background, I was able to ensure that everything was done in a compliant way. I was able to ensure that everything was done with operational resilience. And when the consumer duty came in, make sure everything is done in line with the consumer duty, making sure that our compliance. If you're running a financial institution, 60, 70, 80% of it is going to be compliance, right? Which was my bread and butter. Notwithstanding that I didn't like law, but I bit the bullet and got on with it, right? So that was kind of, it was quite easy for us to segregate it, right? Especially in the early days as well. But as the business grows and it expands, actually those roles start to merge into one, right? They start to merge into one. So last year, Standard Chartered took a stake in the business, right? When Standard Chartered took a stake in the business, it was always my passion. It was always my ambition to actually just build my own business on my own vision, right? I was so grateful for the experience at Algebra, alongside incredible people like Adam Simik at New World and Omer Duzio and all of our early stage investors. But after Standard Chartered invested, I said, guys, the organization is now big enough that it probably needs that once point of leadership. And I'm jack of all trades and master of none. I've hired the master of one in all of our functions. I hand this over to you. And amicably, we decided that I should take my leave. And that's when I started Performr. Yeah.
So it was about 5 years you're part of Algebra, right?
About 5 years, yeah.
Yeah. What was the highlights of that? What was like the things you're most proud of? You look back on that journey.
Oh, I mean, so many things. The thing that always made me the happiest was when I saw our customer reviews coming in. Launching a fintech, in my view at least, and from what I've seen, is challenging, right? It's very challenging because it's not a widget, right, where you can launch it and if it goes wrong, it's fine. You just take it off the app store and you continue. No, you're holding people's money. There are security concerns. There are compliance concerns as well, right? It's regulated. If something goes wrong, it is going to make the news, right? Because everybody wants to write about that fintech that got it wrong. We had a launch, which, broadly speaking, 0 hiccups. I credit that hugely to our team, right? Not only were there no hiccups, even though we had, one day we had 1,300 scammers trying to attack the system at the same time, all trying to log in, right? And we had spent the time to do the groundwork properly to ensure that if that occurred, we could turn it away, and we did. Not a single one of them got through. I was very proud of that launch, but it wasn't just that we launched it well. We had, our rating was like 4.7 stars or something, right? And it's still very high. It's still very high. That's a huge, huge win. I really like, because I love the fact that people love the product. We did our customer service interviews and people came back and said, this is amazing. This is what I wanted. This is what I think. It's amazing to see this idea that was just a seedling on a piece of paper so many years ago actually start to make people happy. That probably has to be the best experience and the best feeling. There are loads of others, but that was probably quite a big one.
Hello. Quick interruption to let you know a bit more about Bay HQ. We're the community for high growth Asian heritage entrepreneurs, operators, and investors in the UK. You can join us totally free at thebayhq.com/join. There you'll get our CEO structure in your inbox every week, which is content, events, and opportunities. You can also get access to our free Startup Fundamentals course by joining. Let's get back to the show. Obviously now you're on your second startup, but as I always say, second-time founders are so much more like, see, there's just that information, that experience you get from your first company makes it so much easier for you in the future. What were those lessons you took away? Like, what are the experiences you had from Algebra that you think makes you much more effective now as a second-time founder?
On so many levels, right? On so many levels. I think when you go out to fundraise, you already have a network in place, right? So you can actually start to call people and make those conversations, and they're not cold conversations. And when you have those conversations with people, they've seen what you've done over the last 5 years. So that makes it slightly easier to actually fundraise. That said, even as a second-time founder, your ambitions change. So because you're going for a bigger ambition, it's still going to be challenging, right? And I think fundraising is always challenging. That's just the nature of the beast. Our go-to-market, I think our go-to-market was very successful in Algebra. So we did a really cool thing where we combined digital acquisition with community events and then content creation off the back of the community events, right? So we engendered trust with people by doing financial education workshops, right? And that trust engenderment and that content creation off the back of it really allowed us to have quite a low CAC. And it was one of the lowest CACs in the, certainly in the kind of, within the first 4 or 5 years of business, it was a very, very low CAC, very high customer spend on our cards as well. So understanding how to go to market is another lesson I'll take away. And there's some other lessons that you take away as well. Yeah, we do that differently as well.
What do you think was the hardest time during Algebra as well?
I think the hardest time, for me personally or for the business? There's two different things.
Yeah, I guess we'll go for both then.
We'll go for both. Yeah. Look, for me personally, I think within the first year of starting the business, my sister Sarah had quite a serious condition, and she ended up in hospital. And she was in hospital for about 4 months. She needed a stem cell donor, couldn't find one nationally. She was going through a condition called myelofibrosis, which is becoming cancer. So helping my sister to find a donor and running a national campaign on that and doing all the newspaper push outs, community events and all that, at the same time as launching Algebra at the Design Museum in front of 400 investors, politicians, journalists, and actually having to have a working product working at the same time. So I distinctly remember on the Monday, my sister left hospital. And then maybe 3 days later or something, I had to get up on stage and show that we had this working product and this working device and everything was going on. Glad to say that she's okay now. She's doing fine. She's great. And I'm also glad to say that the launch went off without any hiccups as well. But that was challenging. Right? But going back to that lesson you learned from, martial arts, bite on your gum shield and get on with it, right? There's no other way around it.
And I think that's an important point as well, is that for all founders, sometimes what you see on LinkedIn, what you see on different people, and it's about their award and this, they've won or whatever it is. The reality is that even if the company is going well, it doesn't mean that other things outside of the company aren't going well.
Yeah.
And that's just a constant struggle because it does. I think probably when you started to work as well, right, this whole idea you separate business from personal life. But if your sister's in the hospital and fighting for her life, that's obviously going to affect your efficiency and how good you are at building. And when you're a founder, there's just less, I guess, support. When I had a job and I'm part of a team, and the people above me, you can kind of slack off a little bit, right? You can just pass on as
yeah.
But if everybody's reporting into you, then it's very difficult, because then if you don't do your job properly while there's something else going on, that affects your employees.
Yeah.
And if that then doesn't work out, then you don't have to let them go potentially. And there's all these different, that cycle. And how did you, so you obviously mentioned about martial arts, but like, how do you think you deal with that level of stress?
I think one of the things that I learned from Algebra is that you need to have a team that's really bought into your culture and is really bought into the vision, right? Because yes, when all of that was going on, inevitably I had to take trips to the hospital and doing all of that stuff, right? And actually what happened is the team they rose to the responsibility because they cared about the mission. They cared about the culture. They cared that we had a smooth, no hiccup launch, right? So that's what I found. So one of the biggest takeaways for me, which was, I mean, it's common knowledge, right? But a shared mission and shared values amongst your team is extremely, extremely important.
And obviously that experience there helped inform what you're going on to do next.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, with my sister, I started to learn a lot about blood and blood disorders and how they can go wrong, etc. And then maybe a year or so down the line, I started to have my own medical problems, right? And I went to the doctor and they prescribed me a course of injections. And I didn't like the side effects of the injections, right? So I thought, let me just get a second opinion on this. So I went and got a second opinion and they said, look, you don't need to do any of that. Just take magnesium. And just take magnesium bisglycinate. It's a specific type of magnesium. Not a lot of shops sell it, so you won't find it in Holland and Barrett, but you can find it from a good retailer online. Here's one. So I went and bought it, took it for 2 months. Lo and behold, everything was fine. And I was so taken aback by this. I was so taken aback, right? My mood changed, my energy changed, my sleep was much better, my recovery was much better, my muscles weren't as sore anymore. And I just thought, hold on a minute, like how many other people must be going through something similar, right? So I started to do the research on this, and between 10 to 60% of the UK population are deficient in 5 key vitamins and minerals, right? We are all, generally speaking, deficient in magnesium. For women, 9 out of 10 women are deficient in iron, premenopause, right? Post-menopause, women tend to be more deficient in vitamin D and calcium, right? Then there's the way that you actually take all of these supplements together, right? Vitamin D, you should take it with vitamin K, because if you don't take it with vitamin K, it's not going to absorb. Iron, you have to take it with vitamin C, right? If you really want to get the best benefits of magnesium, you should be taking it with zinc as well, right? Particularly if you're a guy. If you're taking magnesium, you should have to. It blew my mind. And I just thought, what on earth is actually going on here, right? How is all of this not just common knowledge? The common knowledge is eat your meat, eat your greens, and, everyone is the lowest common denominator. Everyone should be eating the same diet. Everyone should be eating the same amount of carbs. And I thought, this is just incorrect. It's completely incorrect. So I thought, is there a way to track magnesium, right? To track my magnesium, because I was wearing, wearables and all of that. So I thought there must be something to track my magnesium. And there wasn't. So I thought to myself, is there a way to actually be able to track magnesium non-invasively, right? And this at this point was just curiosity. It was pure curiosity, right? So I started to look into it, and I realized that, wow, there are actually lots of ways of being able to track what you're eating, what's going on inside your blood, but not invasively or minimally invasively, right? And you can actually put all of these into a wearable device. So I started to think about, okay, well, how could you kind of possibly bring this into life? And it's not my background and it's not my world, but it's something that I'm extremely, extremely passionate about. I really want to make it happen. So in Muay Thai, we went to see my coach, Amro Ghanem, right, who helped me through 3-4 fights or something. And we got to see him fight in Milan, right, for the European belt, which he won that evening. And I met another one of his students, right, Dr. Louise, right? And Dr. Louise is a biochemistry graduate from UCL, went straight from her degree into her PhD, Francis Crick Institute, Henley Regatta Gold. So I just started to talk to Louise, and I was like, Louise, what do you think? She goes, do you know what? I've actually had a similar idea, right? I've started to think about this myself. So that's when Louise and I got together, and we started to think about, okay, how do we actually build this, and how do we make it happen, and how do we potentially bring it to life? So Performr is going to be the world's first wearable device, the same size as a watch, that can actually tell you your vitamin levels, mineral levels, hormone levels, without actually going into your blood. It's just going to be a simple device that sits on the wrist or can sit on the arm. And we are looking to help initially elite athletes and fitness enthusiasts, And then after that, from wellness consumers as well. And the vision is quite simple. You need to know what's going on inside your body to the level of a blood test by just looking at your phone 24/7.
How long ago was that conversation that when it started?
This was about a year ago, a year and a half ago.
Obviously, leaving the very fast-growing startup that's doing really well, to then start something else which is very, again, mission-driven and something you really care about personal experience. How do you then, like, what are the steps you're now taking? Because obviously you're probably on a faster track than you were because of just your experience, right?
Yeah.
So in the last year, what's been the big steps you've taken?
The first thing that we want to do is validate the technology, right? So we worked with a couple of universities and managed to validate the technology, and we know that it works, right? Amazing, fantastic, right? And great. The sensors actually work. They actually measure what we're looking to measure, and there's a good level of repeatability and sensitivity and all of that fun stuff, right? Once we got the sensors working, we then went and actually started to speak to sports scientists and nutritionists and team doctors for elite sports clubs, right? Mm-hmm. The likes of Arsenal, Liverpool, England rugby, Welsh rugby, golf, tennis, rowing, gymnastics, endurance cycling. And we just started to ask them, okay, so which analytes do you actually want, right? Because the technology that we have can do 10, 15, 20 different analytes, right? We can do vitamin B, vitamin C, we can do vitamin E, we can do sugars, we can do antioxidative stress, we can do lactate, we can do all of these different, which ones do you want? And they started to tell us these are the ones which are most important to us and which will be most important to our footballers, rugby players, etc., etc. We got that market validation quite quickly, and now we're starting to manufacture the prototype, and that prototype will be ready in September. Yeah.
So this is a very different industry, right? So you went from fintech into now health tech, hardware as well.
Yeah.
So what's been the hardest transitions in that?
I think the hardest transition is the product life cycle, right? Or the product iteration cycle, if you like, right? The iteration life cycle in software is measured in hours, right? Probably these days minutes even, right? With advancements. Hardware life cycle? No. It doesn't work that way, right? You are looking at minimum kind of, if you're changing nothing, it will take days, right? If you're changing nothing at all, it will take days. Often it will take weeks. A lot of the time it will take months, right? Thinking about manufacturing life cycle, thinking about how you do delivery, how you do distribution. But for me, I think that's really, really exciting, right? For lots of reasons. I think one, hardware is hard. I like doing difficult things. I like doing complex things. If I wanted to do the easy thing, I probably would have stayed in my previous business and just coasted it through to the honorary chairman of the board or to run one of the departments in the business, right? I just didn't want to do that. And that was what I said to my co-founders. I said, guys, it's not in me to do that, right? So I like doing challenging things. I like doing difficult things. I like seeing things in people's hands that they like, that they enjoy using, that make them happy, that make them healthier in this particular respect as well. So from that perspective, it is a very, very different business. It is a very different business. But you listen to people who are smarter than you. You involve people who are smarter than you. You look at people who've done it before. Most of the challenges have been solved, right? Distribution is a done and dusted problem, right? It's been solved before. Customer service, repairs, product iteration, all of these things have been solved, right? The innovation for us is in the biosensors, and that's hard. That's hard.
So on that front as well, so like you said, you've done all these different steps already. How have you found kind of a second time founder journey? Are you enjoying it? What's the bit? It's like, you said you've gone from something which you could have coasted if you wanted to as like things got bigger. How has that decision been for you?
I like wrapping my head around new things. I like wrapping my head around new challenges. And I like wrapping my head around things that haven't been done before, right? I think to me, at least once it gets into the process stage, it's something that excites me, right? I do get excited by it, but I really like the initial innovation and the growth from there. Yeah.
So one thing we're going to start doing now is, so over 100 episodes in, so the idea is in 2 years' time, we'll get you on again.
Yeah.
And what would you love to say that you've been able to achieve Performr.ai in that point? So I asked you about Algebra and what you achieved in that 5 years, what you're most proud of. What would you love to say in, 2 years' time in Performr, we've been able to do this?
Here's what I'd love to say, right? A lot of people will now look at what we're doing and say, is that even possible? In 2 years' time, I want everyone to turn around and say, of course that was possible, right? I wanted it to feel like it was obvious in hindsight, right? Like this is just a ubiquitous piece of technology that everyone is using. And of course you would go and use the Performr strap or the patch, right? Why would you not go out and use it? So that's what I would want in 2 years' time.
And then say in 10 years' time,
yeah,
what's the overall big dream, big ambition that might sound crazy for this?
I would love to see the level of nutritional deficiency decrease massively, right? That's what I would like to see. In the last 10 years, I read a statistic, right, which is quite crazy. Nutritional deficiency related admissions to hospital have gone up 3x. 850,000 people last year were admitted to hospital just on nutritional deficiency. We're not talking diabetes, right? We're not talking cholesterol, just in lack of vitamins and minerals, right? Scurvy's on the rise, rickets is on the rise. These are the things that we haven't seen since God knows when, right? I would love to see us reverse that trend, because I really do believe that when you give people the information and you give people the understanding, I think people want to take better care of their health. And I think preventative health is going to be a huge, huge thing in the next 5 years. And Performr will be at the very forefront of putting that literally into people's hands.
So it's interesting here, because I know there's some startups right now doing like extremely premium products, right? So it's like for the pure elite people, right? To be able to have this kind of access to information. And what it seems like you're doing is obviously you're targeting the people going to benefit most first, so sports clubs, people like that. But then, like I said, this is a piece of hardware that eventually someday, if it's a case that everybody then now knows what their hormone levels are, their magnesium levels are, their vitamin levels are, just what impact that can make, right?
Yeah.
And look at the overall health tech scene. Is that the way that you see things going, to be able to make these devices available for everybody someday, or majority of the population?
It is a consumer device. It is absolutely a consumer device. Yes. It's not something that we are building just for elite athletes. It is something that I want to put into the hands of every fitness enthusiast, every wellness conscious consumer. It should be something as easy to wear and easy to understand and as accessible as maybe an Apple Watch or even a Fitbit, right? And that's actually the price points that we're targeting.
What's interesting is it kind of comes almost full circle. So remember, we're talking at the beginning about Algebra, about how the overall mission and what you're trying to achieve there. But that's not, you don't build that product. Initially, you build it for particular segments, then get the validation, get the feedback, and then go further from there.
Yeah.
And it seems like like you said, it's the same playbook, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Let's start with elite sports clubs and people who are going to be really obsessed with this data.
Yeah.
And then use that as a validation to then get into later places. So it's quite interesting.
And look, I mean, in my opinion, right, the best impact businesses are not impact businesses in that way, right? Mm-hmm. And I think businesses that position themselves as impact businesses, they have a very tough time a lot of the time, because nobody wants to be an impact consumer, right? Nobody wants to be a consumer who needs impact-related stuff, right? They just want to be a consumer. They want to use something exciting, interesting, really cool, right? And I think that's what we're doing, right? But I think that the impact on health is going to be very dramatic.
Yeah. So hopefully in 2 years' time, when you come back, you can be able to say, well, hopefully in 2 years' time, when you come back, I'll be wearing one myself.
Yeah.
And I can...
we'll get you one about sooner than that, but yeah.
So we're going to go to quick fire questions now.
Yep.
So first one is, who are 3 Asians in Britain you think are doing incredible work and you'd love to shout them out?
I think Hussein Kasai is doing amazing work, right? I think he's doing incredible work. And what I like about it, he's built incredible businesses, but I also really love how much time and effort he puts into the ecosystem as well, right? So he's not just doing it for him, he's really trying to pull everyone up with him and pull the UK up with him as well. So I have a huge amount of respect for him. I'd say Hannah Hussein, right, at Big Issue Invest, huge amounts of respect for what she has done, what she has achieved, and what she continues to. And just a force of nature, real powerhouse. And the third one, I'm gonna add 2 more if that's okay, right? I'll add yourself and Gavir, right? Because I've actually followed your journey for a while, and I just think what you guys have built and what you're doing is incredible. So yeah, really awesome.
Thank you so much. And then if people want to find out more about you and what you're up to, where can they follow the journey?
LinkedIn, Performr.ai is their website, and maybe the next podcast.
And if people can help you today, right? So people listening right now, they've loved listening to the story, they've loved what you're trying to build. What can they do to help and get involved?
Do you know what? Join the waitlist, right? Everyone who's joining the waitlist, we will give them early access to the product. We will also probably reach out to you for market research. Reach out to us on LinkedIn, connect with us, follow our journey, engage with it. I just want to hear from people. I just want to hear, what do they want? What do they need? What's important to them? What do they like? What do they not like? The more people just flood us with opinions, the better it will be for us, and the better it will be for the product.
So thanks so much for coming on. Really enjoyed listening to this story. And we're obviously earlier we were reminiscing about martial arts days.
Yeah.
But have you got any final words to the audience?
I think for anybody who's listening to this and who actually wants to start on a journey, the hardest part is that first step. Just start. And as soon as you take that first step, everything else becomes clearer. It's never clear 10 steps ahead, right? It's never going to be 20 steps ahead, but those next steps are always going to be a lot clearer for you. And take your magnesium.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.